If you don't have those fundamentals organized in your head and in your business, your ship is a real weak ship. It's put together with duct tape and gorilla glue and styrofoam, and it may be okay in smooth waters, but it will not survive a storm.
Welcome to the Lendsetter Show, the show that blends the art of sales, the science of success, and the strategies of real experts in the mortgage and sales industries to help you grow your client base, increase your revenue, and get in control of your life. I'm your host, Preston Schmidley. Kick back, enjoy the episode, and don't forget to subscribe. What's going on, friends? Welcome to this episode of the Lendsetter Show, where we help mortgage and sales professionals all alike. And I'm very excited because on this episode, we have a very, very special guest, somebody who's been a very long time mentor to me on this journey, unbeknownst to him, but he has been. And it's cool because in recent times, we've been able to spend more actual time together like this, and I get to learn directly from him, and there's a wealth of knowledge there. So I want to introduce somebody I have a huge amount of respect for, Dan S. Kennedy. Dan, thank you for being on the Lendsetter Show today.
Happy to be with you.
Yeah. So, as you know, our primary audience is mortgage brokers, originators as a whole, and obviously we speak to salespeople because there's a lot to be garnished from this, and really, the difference between a mortgage and a widget really isn't. I mean, there's some nuances, but a sale's a sale, right? So, it's been an interesting time in the last year, especially if you zoom out 2 years and look at that time horizon, 2020, 2021. If you fogged a mirror, you made money in mortgage, right? And then and money was free, by the way. 2.875 on a house note. It's like we're printing. So now we're in 2023, and comparatively, the market is, it's people don't know how to navigate it. People who've done this for 30 years are going, I've never seen this before. Which is interesting to me, just knowing the history of mortgage. But I'd be curious about your take and kind of setting yourself up for success, knowing that, like most businesses, mortgage is cyclical. I'm big on creating a moat around a business and preparing for hard times and recession and all that. Because I've always said what applies in a recession applies in a boom, but it's not the other way around. I'd be curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, you sort of zoomed over as a small point, something that I think is a very big point.
Okay.
And it's a failure of the overwhelming majority of people in just about every business. So no mortgage industry professional owns the guilt on this sin. Mm-hmm. It's almost a universal sin. And it is ignorance about history and ignorance about the history of your particular field. 90% of the people that I encounter one-on-one, whether via consulting or all the way down to, a quick conversation with an audience member at an event, if I ask them 3 questions about the history of their industry, they don't know. They know what happened yesterday. Mm-hmm. And that leaves them unnecessarily vulnerable to reinventing wheels that actually just need to be gotten out of a closet from time to time and dusted off. Mm-hmm. So there's really no set of circumstances that A, haven't already occurred, and B, that somebody didn't figure out how to thrive and prosper in, while others fell to the ground en masse, weeping and bleeding. That's the history of business and economics in America and in the world. Right. So, and of course, when I came up in business, we were in the Carter and Carter aftermath recession. So we had prime interest rates of 12 to 16 to 18%. People were paying 33% on their credit cards. If you could get a 12% mortgage, you were like golden.
Right.
And we also had double-digit unemployment and double-digit inflation, worse than the inflation we've got now.
Mm-hmm.
And people that don't know that and don't have any understanding of how in any given field businesses won or lost in those circumstances are having to invent when really all you need to do is find it and implement, right? And so it's a big irritant to me,
Mm-hmm.
really, when I sit in a room with people who are like a marketing team assigned to this project, and I stump them all with something that is historical, but relevant to the current set of circumstances that we're in.
Mm.
And there have been periods in your industry and in others when money has run uphill.
Sure.
Right? When, a monkey throwing feces at the wall got rich. There have also been periods of time where liquidity is tightened up to the point that you might as well have taken the word out of the dictionary, which pretty much was the years I just described.
Right.
And every dollar anybody was spending, except for the really, really, really rich, was a hard dollar to pry out of their fingers. And yet, people got rich in every category of business you can name under those circumstances. So there's a model. In my Renegade Millionaire system, I talk a lot about modeling, which is not finding one person to copy. Like, oh, I'm an investment guy, so I'll dress like Warren Buffett, I'll talk like Warren Buffett, I'll believe like what. No.
Right.
But you probably find 5 or 6 things from Warren Buffett that belong in your model. You probably find 5 or 6 things over here that belong in your model. So modeling is very important. And the first thing I do, if I am stuck in a learning curve environment, which I try to stay out of, but I write copy and consult in a lot of different fields. So every once in a while, I find myself where I don't have my own set of historical reference. One of the first things I do is go get my history. Because in many cases, I don't need to invent anything. I get to take it out of closets, brush dust off of it, stitch it together, and the client thinks, I'm Thomas Edison and I just invented light,
Yeah.
And what he doesn't know doesn't hurt him. So it's a big bugaboo for me, right? The other thing is that under all fluctuations, booms and busts and the Industrial Revolution, the rise of tech, under all sort of macro influences, there are certain fundamentals of success that do not change. And that's always a good place to start, is to make sure that you've got the fundamentals right. And Jim Rohn always said, if somebody invites you to their factory to see where they are making antiques, you want to watch your wallet. And you want to focus on fundamentals. So, there are certain fundamentals, like you said, ultimately a sale is a sale, right?
Right.
And there are fundamentals, for example, of how people get to the point of trust, how people get to a point of preference. I want to do business with you rather than anybody else, that counters and contradicts commoditization and price fee rate only a decision making, those fundamentals don't change. And so if you master those fundamentals, you've like built yourself a really sturdy ship with which to sail the roughest of waters. If you don't have those fundamentals organized in your head and in your business, your ship is a real weak ship. It's put together with duct tape and Gorilla Glue and styrofoam, and it may be okay in smooth waters, but it will not survive a storm.
I heard you through one of your various trainings through the years. I've heard you describe it's kind of akin to this, is that most people, they think they run a business, but what they really have is a series of disconnected income events. And so there's a lack of structure there on how they continue to get the next meal. Which obviously ties into, as you call it, present bank and future bank, and building systems that help you get both, right? So, you mentioned there something I think is worth diving into, as far as, going through the fundamentals, because I'm big on fundamentals. I mean, there's a few things that are timeless, whether it's direct mail, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, it could be emails. I don't really care. There's things that really universally apply, and maybe require some modification, but there's some universal truths to this. What are some of the things that you've kind of observed that help somebody? You had kind of mentioned creating a sturdy ship there. What are some of the things that you feel kind of add up to that end result for a business owner?
So a couple things. So one, which you identified, is that a lot of people think they own a business, and actually a job owns them.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe with bigger zeros, as they quote, quote, succeed, they are still a paycheck to paycheck person, just like Joe Lunchbucket. Okay. They need next week's deal to pay last week's bills. And they're that way the 20th year they're in business, in the industry that they're in, just as they were the second year. Now, they may have 3 houses instead of 1. They may be on the third wife. They may be on a second boat. But in reality, they're paycheck to paycheck, right? Whereas owning a real business, you have a business that is working for you, and it is not entirely dependent on your manual labor. Okay? So people that come from the sales side, it's hard for them to shake sales culture. And sales culture is about hunt, kill, eat. Okay? And it evolved from a time when there were no refrigerators. So you hunted today, you killed today, you ate today, and you went back out tomorrow and hunted and killed to eat. And here we are in 2023, and most salespeople still behave the same way, even though we have refrigerators. And it's hard to shake them from that culture, right? Whereas a marketing culture is really a business. And so marketing, preceding and seamlessly leading into the selling, allows you to have media working for you instead of just manual labor. So now let's leap to something specific, okay? How much of an authority you are perceived to be by your prospect by the time you have a sales conversation with them. So your doctor, for most people, their answer to that is a really good answer. They have what's called the power to prescribe. They don't really have to sell much. They say to you, hey, here's the x-ray, here's the MRI, I'm your doctor, and I'm telling you, you need to take this pill, or you need to lay down on this gurney, and we need to get you in right away. And you take off your clothes and you get down on the gurney. Okay, they have the power to prescribe. At the opposite end of that scale is the poor salesman who is viewed essentially as just another salesman. He has almost no authority. And so every inch is heavy lifting. So if you change that dynamic with marketing, and specifically with what I call info first marketing, so that you create authority, you automatically create preference. Right? If you're the number one authority on X, and you've presented yourself that way to me, you have more power to prescribe to me about X and less need to act like a salesman with me about X. And now you have de-commoditization, which is that rates, price, fee, etc. Now, instead of being the number one thing on the decision matrix, is maybe number 4 or number 6 or number 8, or maybe it's erased altogether. Right? And almost anybody can make this change in any business they're in. It's not instant, and it's not simple, but it is easy. So it's complicated, but it's still easy. All of its secrets are pretty visible. You kind of know what makes an expert. You know what makes an expert specialist. You know what makes an authority. You know what makes a celebrity. And so you can take that and remake you and your business to be that. And now you've solved a whole host of problems all at once.
You talked about something there that I think is worth diving into a little bit. So one of the things that I see a lot is that there's kind of what I would call almost a failure to launch for people. There's a fear about becoming the specialist, right? Because when I talk to an originator, for instance, and I go, well, what do you know, what makes you special? You know, it's like, well, I can get low rates. I can get, I got fast turnaround time. It's like, well, that's the cost of admission. Like that's the expectation
right.
just to do business.
That's right. That's the ante to get in the game.
Right. And
that's
so
all it is.
In that arena, and I often warn our members about this, is in that arena, it's like if you're worried about those kind of things that are commoditized, there are juggernauts that are heavily dependent on the internet and have built these digital systems based on large budgets, Super Bowl ads. They have the brand recognition to dominate that space, and they can buy all the impressions and squeeze you out, right? And so my question for you is, for an originator who might be going, Dan, this all sounds great, but I can help everybody. I help everybody, and I don't want to turn business away. How can somebody like that de-commoditize themselves in a generally otherwise commoditized market?
Well, so by the way, most markets are generally commoditized. So what your loan officer feels is a unique problem to him is not a unique problem at all. Right? There's over 500 amusement parks in the country, and the only one that's de-commoditized is Disney. Mm-hmm. Right? And anybody, Universal Studios could copy them. They're just not smart enough. So the first answer to your question is decision. So the sales professional, in your case, the loan officer, has got to commit to the concept that I don't want to be a third-class citizen in this industry, commoditized at enormous disadvantage to, as you say, for example, really big entities who actually, they're not even working with real money. So you're doing your advertising and your marketing and you're selling with real money, and you need to get real money back. in order to pay real bills. They're using Wall Street investors' money. They're playing a game with fake money, and they can play the game a long time with fake money, losing, and still dominating a space. So going up against them head to head with vague claims of "I'm faster, I care more, we give better service." See, that's a losing proposition. And if you don't know what to do, then you start by looking around at everybody else is doing, and you know that you shouldn't be doing that. Okay? Because the overwhelming majority of people in every category of business, including yours, okay, are earning average or below average incomes. Every industry has the same prosperity pyramid. There's 1% at the very top. There's 4% doing very well. There's 15% doing good. There's 40% doing just good enough not to quit. And there's 40% starving. So if you add the 40 and the 40, 8 out of 10, whatever they're doing is wrong. So if you didn't know what to do, you just make a list of what the 8 out of 10 are doing and start by not doing that. But you have to be conceptually committed to this before you will have the imagination and the brass balls to then do what is necessary to separate yourself from the crowd at the bottom. One of those options, there are options, but one is specialization or perceived specialization. Because people, and the more affluent they are, the more this is true, people intuitively, instinctively, and consciously want who or what is specifically for them. They don't want what is for anybody and everybody. Because by the very nature of that, it says to me, it can't really be great for me if it's also great for my idiot brother-in-law at the other end of the city who barely gets a living. Say, it can't be great for both of us. So maybe it's great for neither one of us. But I want something and someone that is great for me, right? So you've got to sacrifice to specialize. There's no doubt about it. Okay? When the big, God, who are they? When the big second mortgage company that specializes in veterans goes on TV. And
is it Veterans United?
USA, thank you. Veterans United. Veterans United probably dominates the space online. And USAA pretty much dominates it on broadcast. Okay? Every ad they run, everything they say says, if you're not a veteran, don't call us. They sacrifice them. They had a whole campaign last year of Gronk from the New England Patriots, okay, trying to weasel his way in to get to becoming a USAA member and being able to buy insurance from them and get mortgages from them, and constantly being turned down because, sorry, but you're not a veteran. Right? So they are sacrificing tons of eyeballs to get the reaction from a percentage of the eyeballs of, wait a minute, hey, those guys are for me. They're talking only to me.
And that sale for the person that you are specializing in now becomes infinitely easier.
Oh, it's profoundly easier. So when you become known for something in a marketplace, I want to find a list here. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to look for it. Here we go. So as a freelance professional copywriter, one of the things I got known for as a specialist was information marketing, and inside that, filling seminar seats. So the talk of that town was and is, nobody's better at putting butts in seats than Kennedy. So now when somebody comes to me and says, I need to put butts in seats, will you do that for me? Okay. That sale is like not a sale. It's a prescription. Well, I could. Here's what you need to do. Boom, 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 boom. Here's what that's going to cost. Boom, 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 boom. And do you want to pay it all up front or do you want to pay it in thirds? End of sale. I just did the whole sale. Right? Because there was predetermined desire on their part to get me if they could, because I was perceived as a specialist for them. Now, I also have the right copy for skincare, and but that's not the point. So specialization is one of these pathways. Another one that's very powerful is being the provider who fixes what people hate in a business, in a service category, in a profession. Okay? So like I have a client that works with small law firms. He's what you are to loan officers, he is to small law firms. And one of the things all clients hate about their lawyers is the lawyer never calls and gives them an update on what the hell's going on with their case. And they let it go and let it go and let it go while their frustration builds up and up and up until they finally call to get an update. And they hate it. Mm-hmm. So he teaches the law firm to fix that. Number one, operationally fix it. So everybody gets an update every week on their case, right? Then another path of my 6 big ones for this is performance guarantees. So now you can't guarantee the legal work, but you can guarantee this. So now he's able to take what he fixed that they hate and turn it into a performance guarantee. We guarantee you will get an update every week on your case, or we'll refund your fee.
It's a solid offer.
Right? It's great, right?
Yeah.
Client goes.
And it costs them damn near nothing.
It's actually doing what you should be doing anyway, right?
Right.
I mean, right. There's another pathway which is kind of like specialization. It's great affinity. Okay? So people shouldn't have a buying preference with professionals because of this. People shouldn't get to trust this way, but they do. Mm-hmm. One of the big points I make in my No BS trust-based marketing book is people get to trust for all the wrong reasons. That's why people lose all their money to Bernie Madoff and FTX. Okay, they get to trust for wrong reasons. So affinity is a great one. Okay, can be ethnicity, can be the church you go to. It can be that you were a veteran, dad was a veteran. It's so I'll give you a precise example. We have a longtime member, James Lang, and Jim is a financial advisor and money under management guy in Pennsylvania. Okay, meaning he sells financial products annuities, insurance, etc. And he has a money under management part of his business where you just hand it to him and he manages your portfolio. I don't know how many there are in Pennsylvania, but there's a slew of them. Right? Mm-hmm. And rate of return, if you don't head it off, is a big topic of conversation in that business. Right? Sure. What rate of annual return can you get me on? What does this annuity pay? Oh, I'll go Google annuities and I'll see what they all pay, et cetera, right? So all these problems exist in that business. Well, he has a fortunate affinity, which I beat him up to capitalize on. His mom's a college professor. His dad's a college professor. His brother's a college professor. His cousin's a college professor, all in the greater Pittsburgh area, right? And he's professorial. He comes across that way, probably because he's been around them, right, his whole life. So I said, why are you screwing around putting the general public into your marketing funnel? The same general public everybody else is putting into a marketing funnel. And then basically you're all saying the same stuff to them because you don't have much choice, right? When you could just put college professors into a funnel just for college professors, only talk college professor talk. Use the fact that your whole family is made up of college professors, which is what motivated you to figure out how to do the best things you could possibly do with money for college professors for their retirement. Write a book only for college professors about et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. His free workshops, financial advisors all run the come to the evening workshop, get the free chicken dinner, and they all do that. His free workshops are only for college professors.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. His business is 5 times what it was generic. Okay. Higher average investable, therefore higher value per client, much less competitive questions. They almost don't exist. Right. And I could tell you story after story after story of the same model. So affinity is a path. Even process is a path.
It's interesting and you had brought this up for a separate point, but you had mentioned USA and I mentioned Veterans United. In the VA market, I see this a lot for clients that specialize in VA. They get upset when they see a veteran that's, maybe our client or our member is the second opinion, right? But then so this person already has a kind of a rate from USA or Veterans United, and they just go on a rant about how unethical it is on how much they're charging. And it's like, we could debate the ethics back and forth all day. However, that's a perfect example of price elasticity based on affinity.
Well, that's exactly correct. And yeah, you can debate someone else's pricing structure and whether it is fair or not, or gouging or not, or transparent or not. And I guess that's an interesting backyard deck debate to have on your day off on Memorial.
The barbecue.
Right. Yeah. But it gets in your way, first of all, of learning and understanding anything that's useful to you. Right. And second of all, it doesn't help you to be angry at them. One of my business questions is, it's like a sign on the wall, is where's the profit in that? Because as much as possible, I'd rather not waste my time and my energy on things, on people, in places where there's no profit.
Sure.
All the way to, I like to watch television, but I like to watch TV that I might get something from in addition to entertainment that I could use rather than just entertainment, right? So I understand people being mad about it. And by the way, that exists in every business too. Okay. So if you go into a room full of psychologists, you only need to say Dr. Phil, and everybody, I'm serious,
I
and
believe you.
everybody will set themselves on fire telling you what a fat fraud he is, and they're a better psychologist than he is.
Right.
Or if you don't want to say Dr. Phil, say Tony Robbins. You'll get the same reaction.
Sure,
The
sure, sure.
room will set themselves on fire. Okay? And it exists in every business, locally, regionally, and nationally, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you're getting your ass kicked by somebody like that, the first thing to do is figure out why,
Right.
and figure out what you can learn from that you can apply. All these years later, if you go in a room full of magicians and you say Houdini, they all want to tell you that he really wasn't a very good magician. Okay? But so what? Right?
He's
Why
Houdini.
not
Yeah.
why not look at what he did other than being a mediocre magician to make himself the number one magician and the richest magician in the history of magic? Why not look at that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And say, okay, maybe tweaked for different ethics or different, I can use that.
Well, and it's the ethical part of that's interesting because it's like you could still learn plenty from USAA. I mean, there's a master class in marketing there alone. Veterans United is another great example. It's like you could completely use and leverage the same strategies they're doing, and then that affords you the privilege of price elasticity should you choose to raise rates. Doesn't mean you have to, but it's a nice thing to be afforded, right? It's like it's a nice place to have that leverage and control to be able to should you want to.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. And look, value. So you have to get past, in order to have fee elasticity in a profession, you have to get past the idea that all the value is just in the deliverable. Because the value for the consumer, for the customer, is much more complicated than that. Okay? So customers want to feel good about the decision that they've made, to feel secure about a decision they've made, to feel affinity with a group or an organization that shares their values or in some way supports something they support. They, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that value to them is worth money. So any of us who charge premium fees for our expertise and our time and our care on top of the core deliverable that we provide are not ripping people off. We are delivering a package of value that is important to our customer or our client or our patient. So like 40% of necessary drug prescriptions don't get filled. Roughly half of that is money, but half of that is not. It's that those doctors didn't have enough authority with their patients that they went and filled them. Right? One answer to that is to be a doctor that's difficult to get to and difficult to convince to be your doctor and who charges more money. Okay? So in every business, there's a there's a price fee, sort of range, right? I mean, purely on a utilitarian basis, if everybody bought and everything was sold based on its utility basis, its actual deliverable, right? Then the only car on the road would be a Kia. Right? Well, I'm serious. There'd be
Right.
no justification to have any other car, right? And everybody would shop at Walmart, et cetera, right?
So you're saying essentially stripping away the perceived status and all of those ancillary things. It's if it was just the bare, it gets me from A to B. The only
Yeah,
relevant vehicle is the cheapest.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And so that's why like the internet has is such um, a great God that giveth and a great God that taketh away.
Right.
Because on the taketh away side, it enormously facilitates commoditization,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it forces everybody to get smarter if they're going to prosper. Just think of being a retailer. You think you got problems. Right? I mean, seriously, let's say you got a Williams Sonoma store that sells all sorts of stuff for the kitchen and for cooks. Right? Well, people go in, they get something demoed to them, they're interested in it. Sonoma Williams made them interested in it, educated them about it, and then they take their phone and they photograph the barcode on the box, and up comes 5 different places you could buy it at 5 different prices. 9 out of 10 times Amazon is the winner. Okay?
Right.
So think about that cheery position to be in,
Hmm.
right? So you're delivering all the extra value, and then the damn consumer is running off and buying it from. It's like having a watch store and getting you interested in a real expensive watch, and then you run and buy it from a guy in the alley, right? That's now the retail problem of the industry.
Mm.
And some figure out what to do about that. Williams and Sonoma has. Others do not figure out what to do about that. And there's a technical business term for them. Gone.
So I love it. So there was something there that I think is important to orbit around because I'm big. I always tell our clients it's kind of a two levels of thought here that people seek price in the absence of value, and value is a concept predicated on need. I would be curious about, you and I understand this stuff because you much longer than me, but we've been doing this for some time. And so obviously we think about this in everything we do. But like,
So I'd go a little broader than you.
okay.
Okay. People seek price in the absence of any other information,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Mostly regarding value. Okay? But people seek value about needs and wants. And the truth is, people are always more motivated to pick a provider, to buy a product, and to pay a price based on wants, even than needs. So in a given transaction, their needs have to be met, but there has to be a reason for preference. There has to be a reason why they would rather have you meet that need for them than anybody else meet that need for them. But if you give no other argument, of course, then you're an idiot if you don't buy by price.
Right.
Right? How dumb are you?
Well, that's all you got to go by anyways. I mean,
If there's three blue, if you decide you want a navy blue blazer, which one did I do? Guilt you into going and putting a jacket on?
You did actually. You did guilt me into putting a blazer on, yeah.
Um, 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 Uh, if if you decide you want a navy blue blazer, like you got to go to a funeral or your wife is dragging you to some cocktail party where she works, which I think is probably the only way you would buy a navy blue blazer. But if you decide you want one and you go to the mall and there's three of them in the window and they look identical to you, and one's 199, the other one's 399, and the last one's 899, and you go inside and the salesperson does not differentiate for you why that is, right? You're a moron if you don't buy the cheapest one, right? Or what most people would do in that situation is they would say to themselves, nobody's helping me here, but there's probably something wrong with the cheapest one.
Mm.
There probably isn't that much difference between the other two. I'll buy the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Left to their own devices.
Create their own reasons.
Yeah. So, so like one of the most expensive off the rack suits I ever bought. I usually have them made for me, but so I'm in Vegas.
Yes.
And we're in the forum shops, a buddy of mine and I. And it's gone now. There was a Bernini store there. And a couple real nice suits in the window. Double-breasted was in at the time. The stripe on stripe, same color. So black stripe on stripe, silver stripe on stripe. So I say, just for kicks and giggles, I want to go in and see, what the price tag is on that damn thing. And so in we go. The sales guy is there. And he was perfect. I mean, perfect.
Yeah. Because
he started with, because I had a sport coat on. My buddy had a sport coat on. We were on our way to dinner at the steakhouse. And he says, you gentlemen look like professionals, like business people. Right? What do you do? That's where he starts.
It's where the friend rats you out.
That's right. My friend rats me out. And he says, oh, he's a famous professional speaker. He speaks with all these people and Zig. You've probably heard of Zig. And,
Yeah.
And the guy now, that's where he goes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kennedy, but your status, your ability to grab the attention of an audience with the first impression you make in the first 3 minutes, your income probably has a lot to do with your appearance. Well, yeah, right. I mean, you're screwed, right?
Yeah, you're in. You're locked in. Yeah,
you're in, right? And I mean, down the path we went. I had no idea what the suit cost until I had it on and the tailor was out there fixing the cuffs. Because it just didn't matter, right? It was irrelevant to the conversation. Now, I'm affluent enough that it doesn't have to matter, number one. So who you're in front of, which is where marketing comes in, matters a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And so like other professionals are always more likely to pay a premium fee than non-professionals, because if we sell expertise, we value expertise. The guy that works at the Ford plant may not necessarily value expertise in the same way we do, right? So who you're in front of matters, right? The selling environment matters, all of that. But point being, I didn't even really intend to buy it, let alone pay, I think it was, $1,800 20 years ago. I mean, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I remember that story too. And just as a fellow salesperson, I've ran call rooms and I've been doing sales for 20 years. That's actually what got me into marketing. I had a true appreciation for that story when I heard it, because I remember you even going into him talking about how, because you're going to be, speaking, it's going to affect the way the pockets are. And he was talking about like, you're standing in front of a crowd and like, it had nothing to do with the fabric, the buttons, where it was sewn. It was nothing. It was very tailored to your experience. And I thought that I'm like, dude, this guy is wherever he's at in the world, he's making money right now.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, you'll never starve if you know how to sell, but you'll always prosper if you know how not to have to sell.
Mm-hmm. You one thing I want to kind of switch gears here too. That was amazing, and I would recommend people just pause and listen to that last 10 minutes a few times. There's some nuggets in there. Um, One thing that you'd mentioned that, and I've gone through your training on this, guy, I don't know, maybe a dozen or more times in the last year. I'm addicted to the phenomenon. I think there's so much wisdom in it that it's ridiculous. You had mentioned something in probably the first 30 minutes of the phenomenon where you talk about there's two mindsets, and they really dictate everything that happens after that for your life. I'd be curious because I see this in my own experience. We help hundreds of loan officers all across the nation, and I see some of both mindsets, as you could imagine, more of one than the other. And I think it would be good for our audience to hear more about this directly from you.
So I think you're referring to unlimited abundance or scarcity.
For the most part, yeah. You said it in a little bit more poetic way in the training, but that's essentially the core concept, yeah.
So um, um, my AV guy, Ron Sheets, and I were talking right before we started. He and his family were um, getting their eyes checked and getting new glasses last night. And it turns out that his insurance doesn't kick in and cover it for 3 more days, which they find out at checkout.
That's unfortunate, yeah.
Yeah. And so the out of pocket then therefore is $148 for the exams. And the person at the counter in the eye center is traumatized by having to tell him this. So this is a common problem in healthcare practices.
Right.
Eye, foot, back, all of them. And he started like, it's a shame she's, got this attitude about money. I said, well, yeah, first of all, you have to understand her frame of reference. Her frame of reference is not Ron's income. Her frame of reference is not your income or my income. Her frame of reference is her income, which after taxes is probably about $450 a week. So 148 out of 450 is a lot of money. It actually changes what that household's going to do next week, right?
Right.
And then, of course, she hasn't been trained and she hasn't been coached and she hasn't been prepared, et cetera, to handle this. So a lot of people have trouble, for example, with selling up to a more affluent clientele because they're stuck in their frame of reference, which is fundamentally about scarcity. Fundamentally, it is about limitation. Right? The idea that there is only so much money, and often by prejudging, I can tell by the math on the form, by the look of the house, by the whatever, that there's only so much money here. And this number is going to be, prohibitive to them. And then at the opposite of that is the much more correct idea that, first of all, there's great abundance, particularly here in America. There's a ton of money, and there's a lot of discretionary money sloshing around. We have high credit card balances right now for the population, as you know, but we also have high savings account balances for the population, as you know. They didn't spend all their COVID money on crypto. They kept some. So there's there's a lot of money out there. right? Secondly, a truism that a lot of sales professionals, they either never learn it or it takes it happening to them 6 times, 8 times, 12 times, 16 times before they get it, is that people find money for what they feel they need and want, for what is important to them. And if having you versus anybody else handle this for me is important to me, if it's what I want, often magically, I actually do have access to the money. Every direct sales guy or gal has a version of this story. Zig tells it with pots and pans of being in this rundown house and discovering that they barely have a functioning bathroom that needs to be remodeled and redone and so forth. And he's there pitching the $800 set of cookware in 1960-ish. And he pulls his punches. He just kind of shifts into low gear and just tries to get through, get the pots packed back up, and get out of the house. Right? 2 reasons. One, he doesn't think there's any way in hell that they're going to be able to buy an $800 set of pots and pans. And number 2, he feels instantly guilty about even trying to get them to buy an $800 set of pots and pans when, mama's having to use the toilet with no walls around it out in the hallway. And so he pulls his punches and he gets out of there. And the irate man of the house comes out the front door and lays into him. Number 1, you don't get to judge what we buy. Number 2, if mama wants them pots and pans, mama's getting them pots and pans. We've gone 3 years with the bathroom the way it is. We could go another 6 months. So you get your butt back in here, boy. And I got $800 in my Levi's, and we're getting these pots and pans in the kitchen. So Zig has that story. Glenn Turner has it about sewing machines, selling in the home. Everybody who has ever sold direct sales in the home, encyclopedia, vacuum cleaner, etc., we all have this same story because we have all made this same mistake, right? We have imposed our value and priority system on the prospect, not let the prospect show us their value and priority system. So almost everything is then controlled, as you said. Ad copy you write, the sales letter you send, the presentation you make, the expectation you have, the fee you set, almost everything you do is governed by where you are in this mindset. Do I believe that essentially there's unlimited abundance and that people have a demonstrated behavior of getting or finding the money for what they value, want, and need? Or do I believe it's very limited, money's hard to get, it's tight, only some people have it and some people don't? Where are you on that spectrum? And almost everything else that happens or that you are able to make happen is rooted in that mindset.
Well, it's interesting. So you mentioned money specifically for this example, and scarcity probably directly tied to that, which I kind of view money as a unit of measurement for value exchange, right? It's like it's not the only form of wealth, but it's a pretty good indicator, right? And so I was just thinking it back to the phenomenon and the way that you mentioned it in that. I think it even kind of transcends money to opportunity, to potential, to education, to a lot of great things. You said somebody else doing something. There's two schools of thought. Somebody else doing something does not indicate that somebody else could do it or that I could do it, right? And that's school A, which is probably the school most people fall into, and school B is proof that or somebody else doing something is proof that I could do that. Anybody could do that, right? And
Yep,
and whichever one you cling to will determine what you do. Therefore,
absolutely. So there's a chapter that my regular book publisher would not put in a book. I forget which book it was. They refused to use it, and I used it in my autobiography. The title of the chapter is "Michael Moore is a Big Fat Idiot." Um,
I
and,
love it.
and the chapter is exactly about this because Michael Moore speaks to, and it is a liberal idea, it is a Democrat idea, speaks to this 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 conflict. And so Michael Moore insists that people who have made themselves rich from scratch by whatever mechanism, whatever business they've done it in, okay, they are super freaks, and seeing them cannot be used as inspiration that, gee, if they can do it, why not me? And in fact, that the super freak examples are used to sell a BS American dream to the masses and convince them of pilot error so that they won't have a giant revolution and hang everybody outside the castle. Now, that's his position. It is not a unique position. It's a liberal Democrat position. The entire poverty industry, the fourth biggest industry in America, is based on that idea that most people can't. Okay? It's an unofficial caste system. Okay? You're in poverty, you're unable to, and if you come from a bad family, if you don't, now, all of that is a statistical disadvantage, right? However, these super freak examples, there's a ton of them. I mean, there's a ton of them in every generation. So the other position, right, the other idea is to look at those who have made themselves rich, successful, extraordinary by any means. Doesn't have to be sales, doesn't have to be business, okay? That they have done something that you can too. Now, there's a few genetic,
Right.
arguments, but they're few, okay? Like the idea of me being a NBA player at any point, I probably lack the genetic talent to have done that.
Same.
Although we don't know for sure, because I'm 6'4", if I had dedicated myself to that and to nothing else from the time I was 9, maybe, we don't know. Okay. There's certainly football players, NFL players in every generation of players who have been too short, too small, too skinny, too this, too that, who all got rings. So if you're the other guy, to their credit, the two top draft choices this year at the televised draft both said this. To their credit, they turned to the camera and they said to the young people watching this, you have to understand, if you approach this like I did, and you approach life like I have, I come from a terrible neighborhood, a bad family, all sorts of disadvantages, all kind of problems, and I taught myself discipline, success habits, etc. Maybe you can't be standing here, but you could be standing somewhere like this, right? So those are the two, right? So the original premise of Think and Grow Rich, written by Napoleon Hill, set out by Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie is one of the first billionaires in America, made from scratch.
Billionaire by today's standards, or was he a billionaire then?
He was a billionaire then.
Holy shit.
Carnegie was really the first to have and enunciate this idea that we should be able, if we can teach people the skills of making steel in the factory, we should be able to codify the skills and teach them the skills to be successful in life. And he's one of the first to really sort of believe that, and set Hill on his mission of interviewing 500 of the most, which then led to the 17 laws of success published by Hill. So where you are on this has a great deal to do with everything, all your behavior beyond it, right? So when you see someone highly successful, do you say to yourself, freak, out of my range, or, what the hell are they doing that's different than what I'm doing, right? When I was a little kid, we lived next door to a very eccentric, rich guy. I didn't know how rich then. I still don't, but I know rich. And when I realized he was rich, I had a lot of questions. It's funny that a lot of not rich people don't have any questions. They all have opinions, but they don't have any questions. Well, it's because of this. See, their starting premise is, I can't. So why ask? What would be the point? Right? Whereas the entrepreneur's premise is, if they can do it, I can do it. I just need some information. I got the success skills. I can get my ass up in the morning. I can go to work. I got all that figured out. So if I want to do that, I just need some information. Right?
So before we close out this podcast, Dan, I would like to kind of just ask you a question, and this could go thousands of different ways. I want you to imagine a loan originator that's listening to this podcast, and maybe they've hired us to help them with lead acquisition and CRM and infrastructure and coaching and consulting and all of that. Maybe they haven't, right? Either way, I'm curious about one thing that you would advise, and it could be a mindset, a tip, whatever, that you believe, good market, bad market, will help strengthen them and create a better moat around the business they're running.
So you alluded to it earlier, and that is randomness versus system. So one of the Hill laws of success, Hill said it as organized effort. So most people that aren't hitting their goals, for most people, it's not because they're not putting in effort. It's because they're putting in disorganized effort. Okay? And by and large, the less randomness you have in everything, the way you manage your time, the way you continue your education in this business, the way you generate your leads, the process you put your leads through, the presentation you make, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The less randomness you have, the more success you have. So in the big leagues, for example, in sports, randomness, everybody tries to get rid of it. So down at the backyard football level, and in some cases, all the way into high school, in a few, all the way into college. The playbook is everybody go long. But when you get to the pro level, that ain't the playbook.
Yeah.
You got a hell of a complicated playbook to learn, and there's no randomness. On this play, that receiver is supposed to make his turn exactly 11 yards down the field and come back 1. And if he goes 13 and he does that about 3 times in a row and he's playing for Belichick, he ain't playing for Belichick anymore. He's traded, okay? Because you are not going to get to the Super Bowl running random football. And it's true really in everything. I sold for 9 years. I was on the #1 seminar tour in America with really big audiences, 10,000, 15,000, 20, 25,000 people in basketball arenas. But even around that, for about 20 years, most of my speaking was on magnetic marketing, and it was done to sell a resource kit, the magnetic marketing system.
Mm-hmm.
So that speech was scripted, memorized, practiced, physically choreographed. You could wake me up in the middle of the night, give me 3 words anywhere in it, and I could start. The AV crew at the big events literally used to play the game of what time was I going to say this and make bets on it. And pretty much you could set your watch by where I was going to be and say what.
That's great.
The best in the business. There's a guy named Ernie Kessler, who's one of the best platform salespeople I ever saw. And you could set your watch in his presentation by when he picked up his glass of water and how he held it. And that's a pro. That's a real pro. And so you apply that to everything. And to the degree that you reduce randomness and replace it with system, replace it with process, right? Then your success results, income and otherwise, go up.
You know, on that note, this is a topic of discussion sometimes for members and that's something I've come to terms with is not as normal as I thought or wish it is. But I'm curious about your opinion. How do you feel about salespeople that either don't have a script or have one and sometimes use it?
I think they're amateurs. I mean, I think they're fools. Yul Brynner did The King and I on Broadway. He holds the record for the most number of Broadway performances, I think, to this day. He did not every 4th or 5th time do it differently. Mm. He might have wanted to. He might have been bored with it, but he was a pro. Mm-hmm. And so if you want, so you better hope, if that's what you do as a sales professional, you better hope that's not what, say, your heart surgeon professional does. And on the day you're getting a heart operation, that's his spontaneity day. And that's the day he doesn't want to stick to the script.
Right.
You better hope your pilot on United Airlines does not every once in a while want to just turn the navigation system off and see what the hell where we land right before we run out of gas. You better hope, right? And so I just think it's idiotic, and no professional comedian does it. No professional performer does it.
Well, hope has been one of your favorite presidential campaigns, isn't that right?
Huh?
Isn't that part of the Obama campaign?
Oh, look, Obama was a very good candidate.
Yeah.
Wasn't, in my opinion, a very good president. I wish we hadn't elected him. But no. Obama was a very good candidate. He's very smart, obviously. He has good sales. He can read a room. He has good sales instincts. And for the most part, the stump speech was refined and polished and then stuck to. Say, not Trump's kind of bad at staying totally on script, but he does what a lot of professional comedians do. He has polished pieces of shtick, and he may wander off from this one for a few minutes, and then he comes back and connects with the next piece of shtick. So a Trump rally is really now at this point, it's Trump's greatest hits. That's what it is. It's 12 bumper stickers and, Mary, we want to watch TV tonight, but there's no wind. I can almost do the pieces of shtick, right? And the pieces of shtick are almost word for word every single time. Really bad candidates who disappear early in the primary process often are really unscripted. And they either get themselves in trouble or they're not particularly effective. See, look, if you make a sales presentation or you deliver a speech or you have an inbound phone script, there's a way the phone is answered at the office. There is a best word. There is a most effective sentence. And once you find it, then by God, it ought to be used every single time, unless you're running a split test against it somehow to try and now beat the winner.
Right.
But you can't let people, you or anybody else, just use whatever sentence you want whenever you want it. That's like dumb.
Right? Yeah, when you were describing that about how you think people that don't use scripts are amateur, you over the next few paragraphs you use the word hope a lot, and it reminded me of the Obama poster, and that's why I brought that up. I was like, it might be an okay campaign strategy. It's a bad way to generate income.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, that's right. So, like, hope is an appealing idea. Yeah. Hope is not a strategy, right? And we have the record of an administration to prove it. Hope is not at all useful as a governance strategy, whether for business or for government.
Yeah, in one of our recent newsletters, in I think it was the April edition of the Mortgage Maverick, we had actually talked about how you can have freedom of income or freedom of creative expression, but you have to make a choice between the two, because if you're not committed to the process, you can be as creative as you want, but you should probably go make art, because it's not gonna do too well in the mortgage space,
Well, by the way, you won't do too well in the art space either, okay? Because the top paid artists are very strategic and very formulaic about what can I promote, maybe what controversy can I create, what will people buy, right? Because essentially art is bought because the artist has promoted himself and made himself known, and people find him interesting, or people believe that he's going to get even more famous. So the napkin I sketch that I pay $1 million for today is going to be worth $5 million 10 years from now. Why? Because this guy is a promoter. You can go, as we're doing this past Sunday night, 60 Minutes had a segment. I think his name is Jeff Koons. The last name is Koons. He's made himself a very famous artist. And he actually has a factory. He really doesn't do any of the art anymore. He comes up with the idea, and then the factory makes 4 of them, and they only have 4, and then they sell them. He's best known for giant metal versions of balloon animals, like you make for kids at a party. And he's become very controversial because is this art or isn't it, right? And because it's made at a factory instead of the artist actually making every piece, right? He's running it as a business. Thomas Kincaid was disliked by other artists, making a lot less money, and controversial for many of the same reasons. So the truth is, they don't have unfettered creative expression either. Robert Parker, mystery novelist responsible for Spencer. So Parker made his money on Spencer novels. He occasionally indulged himself by writing a Western. He did not indulge himself by changing anything about Spencer. The Spencer novels are like to a formula.
Right.
And you can sort of set your watch by the first time he's going to get hit over the head by somebody in the dark during the course of the story, right? So even artists don't actually they have to make that same choice.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I forgot about it until now, but I read there's a book that came out recently called 10X is Easier and 2X. Phenomenal read, Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And one of the examples he uses about kind of creating an exponential development in your life is the evolution of Andy Warhol, and how he actually put out more pieces than any other artist successfully of all time. And he did that not because he did it by himself. He had a factory, like you said. He actually had, I think it was called The Factory was the name of his kind of co-working space. And he had dozens of artists that he would kind of start the concept. They'd do the next 80%, and he'd come through and done. And it's like, and yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, even artists have to deal with that. Well, Dan, this has been a phenomenal podcast episode. There's so much for our audience to get from this. I'm very excited to hear about the effect it has on people. Are you cool if I do a quick plug for you?
Yeah, sure. Cool.
Dan has written over a dozen books through the No BS series. If you haven't checked those out,
36 to be
36. Oh, geez. Okay,
to be precise.
3 dozen.
No, it's over a dozen.
A dozen's an accomplishment. 3 dozen's just wonderful. So he's got a lot of great books. I've read the majority of them, a few of them multiple times. He has some of my favorite marketing and business trainings. You've been a business strategist and a direct response advertiser and copywriter for how long now?
Well, the first time I got paid for it was 1975.
There you go. I mean, there's some tenure there. So that's a good 48, 49 years. So he knows some stuff. I would strongly recommend checking out his books. I'll actually make sure to drop a link in the podcast and this video to that. But more importantly, I myself have been a Diamond member for years in his program, which is a phenomenal program where it's in my opinion, underpriced. And you have access to dozens of amazing trainings that he's put together throughout those 48 years. And most of them are timelessly powerful. So I'm going to drop a link to that as well. I want you guys to check that out because it's I know as a marketer and a business strategist myself, it's transformed my life. And I feel like I've turned decades into days just through consuming and implementing that content. So we'll drop a link to that if you want to learn more about Dan. I'll give you access to the books, and then also some of his most powerful courses and the newsletter, which is we definitely pulled some inspiration from the No BS newsletter for our Mortgage Maverick. It's been great. And there's even some newsletter trainings in the Diamond portal. They're awesome. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us for the Lendsetter show.
Thank you.
So grateful.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Take care, guys.